Hello and welcome back to the Nearmintgideon YouTube channel. I'm Minty, also known as Nearmintgideon, and today we're talking about Toxrill, the Corrosive. So I'm going to do a deep dive deck tech again. I had a fairly good response last time, so I'll do another one. Toxrill is a Slug horror. He's 7 mana, 5 and 2 black, and he says at the beginning of each end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1, -1 for each slime counter on them. Whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter on it dies, create a black slug creature token. It's a 1/1. And then blue-black, sacrifice a slug and draw a card. So this is Slug Tribal. You care about slugs and you care about your creatures, your opponent's creatures dying, and then you can get value from your slugs in the late game, I suppose, by sacrificing them. Now, Toxrill is a really interesting commander. The two powerful things here, well, I suppose the first powerful thing is each end step. So your opponent's end steps as well, everything gets a slime counter. Your end step, everything gets a slime counter. So in one turn of the table is 4 slime counters. And then the fact that he's a card draw engine in your command zone is always a good thing too. I've got this cool foil version. I wasn't a massive fan of the black and white version, so I went with the foil. And yeah, one important note to make about Toxrill is the -1/-1 debuff that the slug Toxrill gives to your opponent's creatures only applies if he's on the battlefield. So they're not -1/-1, -1 counters. They are slime counters, and if he's not there, if the slug is not there, then you don't get that debuff. So you have to keep him on the board. Now the idea with this deck is we're going to try and give our opponents loads of stuff, card draw and creatures mainly, for then the creatures to die to Toxrill's ability and give us slugs in return. So card draw, creatures, and even some of our own creatures and some other resources as well, like mana. So we can actually flood the board full of creatures, and then when Toxrill comes down, he kills a load of stuff straight away, and you get a load of slugs. So everything's sort of geared around giving your opponent stuff, and then making it a disadvantage in the late game. And, you know, it's kind of a fun deck. Even if you don't get to play Toxrill, you're kind of giving your opponent's stuff, and that's kind of fun. So I think the joke that everyone's making is it's group slug. You know, that is a archetype, isn't it? That you give your opponents things, and then you punish them for taking the presents that you give them. So thematic, because it's a Christmas time, maybe. Who knows? Okay, so we have some removal spells here. That all of these removal spells, maybe this is a removal spell, I've sort of put it in the removal section, give our opponents things. So Curse of the Swine gives them 2/2 boars. It's blue and an X, and then you exile X target creatures, and for each creature exiled this way, they make a boar. So if you exile a load of, I don't know, tokens that you've given people or their creatures, you can get rid of some of the bigger stuff and give them little boars, and then the boars get even smaller and then eventually die, and you get slugs. So giving your opponent stuff, but also taking stuff away. Resculpt is kind of like a one-shot one of these, but it also hits an artifact too. And it doesn't give them a 2/2, it gives them a 4/4 again, but that will eventually die to Toxrill in one round at the table. So, perfect, really. Raven Form, it's a sorcery, that's the only issue with this one. I think Curse of the Swine is 2, it is, yeah. But for just 3 mana, or 1, if you foretell it, you can exile an artifact or a creature, and its controller makes a bird, but the bird doesn't last long and becomes a slug because of Toxrill. So you get the idea. The removal in this deck is all about giving your opponents tokens, and then you take the tokens away and get slugs. So Swan Song, similar vein, counter target enchantment, instant or sorcery spell. Its controller puts a 2/2 flying bird token into play. The bird dies, you get a slug. Pongify, kill a big creature, give them a 3/3. It dies, you get a slug. I should have, what's the other one? Frogify, is that the other one? No, what's the other one called? Rapid Hybridization should be in the deck too. And then finally, one of my favourite cards in the deck, Awaken the Earth. Everyone discards their hand, and each player gets zombies equal to the number of cards discarded. So if you discard 7, you get 7 2/2 zombies, but the 2/2 zombies die to Toxrill, and then you get slugs. So it can be that actually, because you've made everyone discard their hands, say everyone makes 7 zombies, including yourself, no one's got any answers for Toxrill because they're empty-handed, and then all those zombies on the opponent's side of the battlefield die, and you get a bunch of slugs. In fact, you get, in that scenario, 21 slugs. My god, quick maths. 21 slugs and 7 zombies, so you're well ahead if you get this off. So, again, all about giving your opponents stuff. Cursed Disturbance, again, another way of giving your opponent's stuff. You can curse yourself, and then you get a zombie, and they get a zombie if they attack you. You can also curse another player, and if that player is ever attacked, you get a zombie, and the player who's doing the attacking gets the zombie too. So 3 mana curse, again, giving your opponent stuff, which you can then wipe away with Toxrill and get slugs. Hunted Phantasm, I always say that. This gives one player, an opponent, 5 red 1/1 goblin creature tokens when it comes into play. It's also unblockable, which can be relevant. And but all of those goblins, guess what? They die to Toxrill, give you slugs. Crowan Horse, again, when it enters the battlefield, you give it to someone, and then every upkeep, each of that player's opponents makes a 1/1 white soldier creature token. And guess what those creature tokens do? They die to Toxrill, so you get slugs. Clack Bridge Troll, wow, some cards that are difficult to say in this deck. Clack Bridge Troll, trample haste, and he's an 8/8 for 5 mana, that's great. He enters the battlefield and gives a target opponent 3 white goat creature tokens. So you give them the goats, Toxrill takes the goats away, you get slugs. And he also has some relevant text about card draw here. So at the beginning of combat on your turn, any opponent may sacrifice a creature. If that player does, tap this guy down and you gain 3 life and draw a card. So the opponent might sacrifice something with a slime counter on it, which might give you a slug, or they might sacrifice one of the goats. But if they do, you get to gain 3 life and draw a card. And there's some political stuff you can do with this, like I'm going to hit you with an 8/8. If you don't sacrifice a creature, I'm going to smack you. And then they usually sacrifice, and you get to gain life and draw cards, which is pretty great. I don't know whether that's being political or not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm going to punch you if you don't do what I say. Sounds pretty political. Slaughter Specialist. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent makes a 1/1 white human creature token. This is from a very recent set, Midnight Hunt, I think. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. So this gets really big in this deck, because you've got loads of effects that give opponents stuff. Toxrill is wrathing the board away with all those things. This gets huge. And yeah, pretty good. The fact that it just gets big is sometimes relevant, but the main thing we're running it for is 2 mana, 3 slugs. You get the picture. Hunted Horror is also in the deck. This one's less good, but it is a 2 mana 7/7 trampler. The downside is you have to give your opponents 2 green centaurs that are 3/3s, and 3/3s are quite large, like Toxrill doesn't always get them, but still pretty good value if you can actually kill the 2 centaurs with Toxrill's ability. Quick note here is that they say they have protection from black. Toxrill does not care about that because Toxrill doesn't target. He just puts a counter on each creature. So even though the centaurs have protection from black, you can still run it with Toxrill, and Toxrill, he don't care about protection from black with his slime counters. I keep gendering this slug, and I'm pretty sure slugs, I don't know whether they're genderless, but they reproduce asexually. Why am I saying that on a YouTube video? Who knows? Okay. Pursued Whale, not... You thought Hunted Horror was good, but have you tried a Pursued Whale? Right, Pursued Whale, again, enters the battlefield. Each opponent creates a 1/1, and it's a 7 mana 8/8, and it costs more to target Pursued Whale. It also forces your opponents... This is such a weird card. The pirate that you give each opponent that's pursuing the whale, I suppose, forces your opponents to attack, which is interesting, because if you have a board of slugs, or this big 7/7, or this big 8/8, they're not going to attack into you, so they'll have to attack each other, which is kind of cool. Just an interesting card. I got a foil, and I'm just a sucker for foils. God, it looks so good there. Wow, what a cool card. Perplexing Chimera. If you've never seen this guy, I guess you're lucky. He's a really perplexing, very confusing guy. Basically, whenever an opponent casts a spell, you can give them the perplexing Chimera, and you gain control of the spell. So they try and take an extra turn. You give them a Chimera, and then it has to be on the battlefield though. So that often people try and remove it, but then you just give them the Chimera. Now, once you've given them the Chimera, Toxrill will kill the Chimera, and the Chimera will be in your graveyard instead of on the battlefield. Genesis Chamber. Whenever a non-token creature comes into play under a opponent's control or your own control, you create a 1/1 mere artifact creature token. Artifacts are a little bit of a sub-theme of the deck. Again, I really like artifact decks, and blue-black has so much tendency to be really good with artifacts that Genesis Chamber, the fact that the Mia is an artifact does help. Again, you get the bonus because Toxrill hopefully will be out. And if not, it's kind of fun because people just make loads of Mias when they cast creatures. So it's pretty cool. The idea is that Toxrill wraths them away, as usual. Plague of Vermin. This can just win you the game. Starting with you, each player may pay any amount of life. Repeat this process until no one pays life. Each player puts a 1/1 black rat creature token into play for each 1 life he or she paid this way. So there's a combo in the deck, but it's not the total amount of life paid, it's just the amount that each person paid. So if anyone pays any amount of life, Toxrill will come in and wrath the board of all the rats. So the idea is you can pay a load of life and get a load of rats, and you kind of break the symmetry on the card. Also, it's kind of fun. you play this and you're like, anyone want to have some rats? There's also a combo in the deck to finish out the game with another card in the deck, but I will talk about that when I get to it. So that's Plague of Vermin for you. Pretty cool card in the deck. Dousing Dagger gives people plants, but also ramps you if you hit someone. It flips into a land that taps for 3 mana, so that's pretty good. Incarnation Technique. Basically, it allows you to reanimate something, mill the top 5 and reanimate something, but also allows, if you want to, you can let an opponent do it as well, and if you do that, and the opponent is forced to do it, they mill 5, you mill 5, you both return a creature, but also you get a copy of this spell as well. So an opponent copies it and you copy it, so you get 2 creatures back for just 5 mana. And also, again, like I said, loads of removal in the deck, but also Toxrill hopefully wrathing away the board means that they don't get the advantage that they might do, usually. Okay, Sludge Monster. The only other card that cares about slime counters, or even has slime counters written on them, in all of Magic's history, and it came out in the set before. Oh no, 2 sets before. This was in Dungeons and Dragons. Look how similar these set symbols are, man. Crazy. Where's this slaughter specialist? How do new players cope with this? Look at this. Look how similar they are. Are they the same? They are the same. Did they come out? Does this come out in Midnight Hunt then? Oh, I thought it came out in the Dungeons and Dragons one. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they both came out in Dungeons and Dragons, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe. Who knows? Okay. Sludge Monster the only other creature that cares about slime counters in all of Magic history, and basically it says that any creature with a slime counter on it, so is a 2/2 and loses all other abilities. which is super amazing. The combo of these guys is pretty insane because this guy only cares about slime counters on other creatures, and this guy only cares about slime counters on other creatures. They don't care about where the slime counters came from. They only care about the fact that they have them on them, which is crazy because, well, you almost think that they designed it this way, but the one thing that makes me think it isn't, and it's just maybe a bit of a quinky-dink or a coincidence, is that this isn't a slug. And I would have thought maybe if they were trying to pair them up, they would make this a slug too. I don't know. Who knows? Also, Sludge Monster, you're telling me that's not an ooze? Don't get me started on magic creature types. Anyway, so the synergy here is that they lose all abilities and become a 2/2 with the slime counters on them. Toxrill puts a slime counter on everything. Everything's a 2/2. They die more easily to Toxrill. So the combo is like absolutely great. The synergy, I suppose, between these two. It means that basically no one can have creatures on the board. Massacreworm, really good. If you've got this guy out and you Massacreworm, everything dies, and your opponents lose a bunch of life because he enters the battlefield, gives everything -2/-2, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, they lose 2 life. You're doing quite a lot of killing stuff anyway. The tokens you give people, so this is kind of like a burn on a stick. I also have a cool copy of it, so it goes in. So this is a counterspell, commit to memory. But also the memory half can be used as a time twister. Basically, you shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library and then draw 7 cards. So, bit of card draw for everyone. Covered Jewel. I always am so tempted to run this card, and then I never do. I always pull it out. But in this deck, it's quite good. Creatures are going to have a problem sticking around because of Toxrill. So, theoretically, there won't be that many people to attack you. Basically, Coveted Jewel is like the Monarch, but on steroids. So when it enters the battlefield, you draw 3 cards, and it also taps for 3 mana of any one colour. So it's basically a Gilded Lotus with 3 cards attached to it. Now, whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls attack you and aren't blocked, they gain control of the jewel. They untap it and they draw 3 cards. So it's a big price to pay, but it does make the game a bit more fun. As I said before, there aren't going to be that many creatures on the battlefield because of Toxrill's ability, hopefully killing quite a lot of them. So Coveted Jewel might be a good include. Again, it's a bit of fun, really. The deck is meant to be kind of... Oh my god. Deck is meant to be kind of half fun and half mean. Like, that's the whole point of the deck. That's the sort of flavour, if you like. I don't know whether the choices are like CEDH. I definitely know that they're not, in fact. Dictator prefix just flashes in on someone's end step and lets everyone draw more cards. Urza's Guilt. Again, each player draws cards and then has to discard 3 cards from hand. And then loses 4 life. So again, getting people churning through their deck, and bit of discard, bit of card draw, cool art. What more could you want? Temple Bell, classic, sort of group slug type strategy, making everyone draw cards. This is a new one, Sphinx of Enlightenment. It's not a new one, but it's an unusual one because it's from this. I think it's called Game Nights, the set. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent draws 1 card, and you get to draw 3. So, again, giving people a little bit of card draw, and that's it for the card draw section. But, big flyer in the air, blocks quite well. It's a foil, so sucker for a foil. Got Sakushima the Imposter, mainly to copy Toxrill. So you can have 2 Toxrills going. I'm not sure how relevant that is or how important that is, because I think 1 Toxrill is probably enough. But the idea is you can copy Toxrill, or you can copy one of your opponent's value creatures. Just a good card in general. You could also put the other Sakushima in, but that one is muy expensive, and I've only got 1 copy of it, so I didn't put it in. Okay, Demon of Dark Schemes. Again, it's kind of a Massacreworm effect, but when creatures die, you get energy instead, and then when you can pay an amount of energy and 3 mana to put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. The idea with this guy is you're going to be killing quite a lot of stuff, so you might want to reanimate your opponent's creatures to use them against your opponents. Okay, I've got a couple of spells that give creatures a bit like Sludge Monster, but are like kind of one-shot, give creatures diminished stats. So the first one is Mass Diminish. Until your next turn, creatures target player controls have base power and toughness 1/1. So you can wrath someone's board, basically. I wish this was at instant speed, because then you could use it kind of like a fog as well, like make everything smaller, so when it hits you, it doesn't do as much damage, but they kind of see it coming. It's very foretold in terms of, like, not the mechanic foretell, but they see it coming. You can also flash it back for 4 mana as well, so if it's in your graveyard, you can do it again. It's really good because once their toughness is power and toughness is just 1/1, one slime counter from Toxrill will kill their whole board. So pretty good, pretty good. Doesn't work against people who have +1/+1 counters though, because their counters will still add up on the toughness. So yeah. In the same vein, Vidalcan Humiliator has Magecraft. There's a fair amount of few artifacts in the deck, so hopefully you can trigger that main Magecraft ability fairly consistently. And basically what it says is when it attacks, it does the same as Mass Diminish. It gives everything base power and toughness 1/1 until the end of turn. But it does it to everyone's board, not just a single target player. So this is pretty good. I don't know what I say, it's pretty good. I think it's an interesting synergy, right? That you attack, you have 3 artifacts, you make everything a 1/1, and you kill everyone's board full of creatures. I've got a couple of Proliferate spells here, just to proliferate counters on permanents. So Proliferate I really like Proliferate. Both my deck takes recently have taken Proliferate on board and put them in the deck. Basically, you can proliferate counters on permanents or players. So if you choose to, you don't have to, you can put, when you cast either Tezzeret's Gambit or Contingency Plan, you this one draws a card, this one draws 2 cards. You can cast this one for 3 mana and 1 Phyrexian, so you can pay 2 life. And they both say Proliferate on them, which means basically add a counter to any permanent or player you choose that has a counter on it already, and it's just one more of that type. So the slime counters can be proliferated from Toxrill. You can also proliferate some other counters in the deck, like some Planeswalkers. If I don't put Planeswalker in my deck, is it really my deck? So I've got a selection of Planeswalkers. I've also got some stuff with counters, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So the other thing you can proliferate, Planeswalker counters. So I've got Liliana, Waker of the Dead in the deck. I've got Jace Bellerin, Japanese Jace Bellerin, Obnixilis, the Hate Twisted, and Ugen the Spirit Dragon. They all have a myriad of abilities, but again, the reason they work so well is because there's a little bit of proliferate in the deck, and counters are obviously important. So we'll read through the abilities. You're making people draw quite a lot of cards with a lot of other effects in the deck, so Liliana can keep that under control by making people discard, and if they can't, they lose 3 life. A little bit of removal with a second ability, and then the emblem is pretty backbreaking. Basically, at the beginning of every combat, you get to pick a creature out of a graveyard and put it onto the battlefield under your control. It also gains haste, so pretty backbreaking ultimate. I can't remember the ultimate on this Jace, and it never matters because you never use it. We only care about the +2 and the +1, which says each player draws a card, and this one is just you draw a card. But again, just giving your opponents extra resources, this one. This one's a bit of both. Obnixilis the Hate Twisted, basically whenever a player draws a card, he pings them for 1. So specifically an opponent. And because you've got stuff like Jace and you've got the other card draw effects in the deck, you sort of ping people for damage whenever they're drawing a card. And also you can destroy a target creature and its controller draws 2 cards. So you can destroy your own slugs with Onyxilus and draw cards, or if there's a particularly problematic permanent, you can destroy it. Well, I say permanent, but creature permanent. You can destroy it, and that guy gets to draw a couple of cards, which is not too bad. Again, there's lots of draw hate in the deck, not draw hate, but like giving your opponent's card draw in order to get them to have more creatures in hand. You get the picture. Finally, Ugen, extra board wipe with his -X, but also he pings people for damage with his +2. Not always relevant, but maybe if there's a slime counter on something, you can ping it down and get a slug. Who knows? And then his ultimate is, again, backbreaking, draw 7, gain 7, and put 7 permanents into play. So that's the Planeswalker suite. Again, they're not the power level. Again, this deck is not, the cards in this deck are not based on power level. They're just based on interesting synergies, basically. I was going to say fun, but I don't know whether Ugen is ever fun. Okay, more counter synergies. Black Market. Whenever a creature dies, you put a charge counter on Black Market. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you make black mana, equal to the number of charge counters. So you're going to be killing your own slugs. You're going to be killing loads of people's tokens. This should have a lot of counters on them, on this, which means it makes a lot of mana. But also you're proliferating, so you could technically proliferate the counters as well and make yourself even more mana. Throne of Geth. There's another Planeswalker here. But Throne of Geth, again, a little bit more proliferation. Works well with whatever that Mir card was. Sacrifice an artifact to proliferate. One more Planeswalker that I clearly didn't put in the right order. Onyxilus Reignited. A little bit of card draw, a little bit of removal, and his ultimate, again, really good in this deck because whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. You give that emblem to someone. So, again, you've got loads of ways of drawing cards. Again, a little bit of draw hate. Then we've got some more counter synergies. Putting a -1/-1 counter on each creature with black Sun Zenith. And then you can reuse it because it goes back into your deck. Pretty good with the Proliferate, pretty good with the slime counters. Everything's going to be small anyway. You make a bunch of slugs. Slugs are great. Pretty good card. Then I've got a bunch of ramp. The only interesting stuff here, you've seen it all before, and put whatever ramp you want in whatever deck you want, but the only interesting one here is Empowered Auto Generator. Comes in tapped, but you can tap it and put a charge counter on it, and then it taps for mana equal to the number of charge counters on it. So, theoretically, it comes in tapped. The first time you use it, you add 1 mana. Second time you use it, 2 mana, and then on from there. But because of the Proliferate in the deck, theoretically, you could proliferate the charge counters and make this tap for a lot more mana. And there's the ramp again. Again, put whatever ramp you have or want in the deck. I haven't put the most powerful stuff in the deck, just out of, again, this deck is meant to be like a bit of fun, a bit of a joke, but you do need some ramp to actually get to your commander because he's very expensive. I really like this as well, Fireman's Vessel. I think it's a good sort of budget include. Taps with 2 manas. So, haven't got one of them, maybe pick one up, they're really cheap. Okay, then we've got a little bit of board control in Flood of Tears, Decree of Pain, and Toxic Deluge, which is probably more than you really need, because the Toxrill's pretty good as well. You've also got Black Sun Zenith and Ugen. I don't know, maybe I've put too much too many board wipes in the deck, but who cares? More board wipes the better, I guess. Decree of Pain. If you cast it for its full mana mode, you get to draw cards equal to the creatures that died. Flood of Tears, you get to put a big permanent back into play if you had more than 7, more than 4 non-token permanents. So it's a 7-drop you get to put back into play, isn't it? Yeah, so return all non-land permanents to their owner's hand. If you returned 4 or more non-token permanents you control this way, you may put a permanent card from your hand into the battlefield. Oh, it's not, it's just a permanent card. So the idea is you can put Toxrill back into play with Flood of Tears. And then Toxic Deluge, because it's great. Okay, I've got some good stuff now. So Disdainful Stroke, just counter something, mana cost 4 or greater. I think that's pretty good for just 1 generic and 1 blue. I'm trying out this, Visions of Dread. Target opponent puts a card of their choice, creature card of their choice, onto the battlefield under your control for just 3 mana. But also you can flash it back for 10 mana, but that's reduced by the amount your commander costs. So because my Toxrill costs 7, this is reduced by 7. This was from, I want to say either Midnight Hunt or Crimson Vow, but the commander set, but it wasn't the commander set, it was like the cards that came in the collector boosters. Interesting card anyway, so it's always 3 mana with Toxrill, so it's 3 mana on this side and 3 mana to flash it back. I don't know how good it is, because there is the issue that they get to choose, so who knows. Again, just sort of good stuff. This is my foil Consecrated Sphinx. Invocation, that's the one. Really like this card. Again, you're forcing your opponents to draw, so drawing for you as well. Swiftfoot Boots, Lightning Greaves to protect Toxrill. Notion Thief, again, a bit like Consecrated Sphinx, except they don't get to draw and you get to draw. So, kind of a mean card, but also you're giving your opponents loads of card draw, so you might want to take advantage of that with a Notion Thief. Revel in Riches, much like Black Market, except if you control 10 treasures at the beginning of your upkeep, you win the game, and Black Market just makes black mana, whereas this makes treasure tokens when your opponent's creatures die. So, kind of interesting. You're obviously going to be, hopefully, making a lot of creatures die. Counterspell, just because it's good. Mirror Maid is really good as well. Underrated card, I think I talked about it in one of my other videos, my previous videos. Enters the battlefield as a copy of an artifact or an enchantment. So, just 3 mana, any enchantment or artifact you want. You've got a fair few in the deck, so you can copy your own stuff, or you can copy powerful stuff from other people. Animate Dead, Victimize, sack your slugs, make good value. Skull Clamp, sack your slugs, draw cards. Atris, I just really like this card. Again, gives your opponents choices, so kind of fits inside the deck. And then finally, I've just got my lands for the deck. So a bunch of basic lands, an Urborg, some random snow-covered lands, not sure why they're in the deck. Just what I had lying around, basically. And then a Malakir Rebirth to protect Toxrill. But still, and there's a bunch of lands there, there's tons of lands, because Toxrill's so expensive. So that's the deck. Hopefully you came across some interesting cards in there. Visions of Dread is the one that I'm trying to test out a little bit, but yeah, hopefully that was an enjoyable experience for you. Let me know what other includes you would put in your Toxrill deck. Maybe I've missed some. And if you like what you saw today, make sure to subscribe and like the video. Comment down below. I read every single comment, which is not a massive boast, but I do read everything. And I will see you next time. Peace.